Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. I just watched a little Instagram video, about 8 minutes long, of a group of people who refused to wear masks, who were trying to get into a Trader Joe's store, and the employees were upholding the law. This was in Oregon, and I live in Oregon, and we have a law that says that when you go into stores, you have to wear a mask. So these people were trying to get into Trader Joe's, and for 8 minutes, they were just kind of standing there trying to talk their way into the store without masks, and the employees were standing there like this and talking back just as much as they were. And it was pretty appalling when you stop and think of it, that the people are standing up and saying they have the right to go into the store and to shop. But basically, I wanted to address that issue about the law and about the people having the right to go in and do something. You know, they talk about free speech, okay? You talk about the idea of the right to go into a store, but you don't have the right to infringe on somebody else's rights. So the people who are, let's say, if somebody goes in without a mask into a store, and the scientific evidence is that the masks prevent people from spreading the virus to other people. Say you have it and you wear a mask, then you're protecting yourself. You're not so much protecting yourself, but you're protecting other people. So that's what I wanted to address, is that idea of the separation between the two people. The store owners have the right to, well, the people who not to wear a mask, they believe they don't have to wear a mask because their rights are being infringed by having the freedom to not wear a mask. Okay, well, what about the people who have to clean up after somebody comes in and doesn't have a mask? Okay, the cost of maintaining a safe environment in the store. How about the people who are shopping and they have the right, if they have the right to not have the produce or whatever covered with bacteria? So if they go home and they eat it, they're exposed to it on their food. So basically what you're doing is you're saying, I above the law, when you're saying I don't have to do that. And the thing is, even if there is no law, there's still universal law, that what you do to somebody else will be done to you. Now today that was just what triggered me to speak. Now that's fairly obvious, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about take that back and look at one step further back from that. Okay, when we are talking about the end of the democracy, the end of the attack, let's say, on the Capitol, it's the same kind of thing. It's saying we are looking at one side of an issue as opposed to another side of the issue. So who's the victims and who's the villains? And do we have to have victims and do we have to have villains? We're talking about the end of a cycle, but we're not really actually at the end of a cycle. And I want to clarify that. Okay. The U.S. government is in a situation now where we've gone along for 200 and some years. And what we have, because that period of time when we declared independence and then they came up with the Constitution, that was quite a 10, 15 years, before they started to come up with laws and things like that. It was a long period of time. So I'm going to just talk about that was like the beginning when at the beginning of the cycle, we could have gone lots of different ways. There were all these different options, and people were letting go of the old and coming into the new. We don't want a king. We want a republic. We don't want this. We want term limits. We want things like this. Now, we are now at a point at the end of the cycle of our government, but we're not really at the end of the cycle. We are at the end of the point in the planning process where we are at the end of the cycle. No. Okay. The planning process has 7 different steps in it. And the first step is coming up with a plan. Let's say you have a problem. Then you come up with a plan. Does that plan address the problem or not? Is this based on science? Is this based on the full understanding of the root cause of the problem? Okay, so your plan has to address the root cause of the problem, or it makes the problem worse. Okay, so then the next step is then you have to bring in the people who are going to help you do it. Then the third step is, okay, say you're going to build a house. Okay, you're going to build a house, and then you need a house. It's a crisis. Your family's growing. You need a house or something like that. And then, is this house going to solve this problem, or is it going to make the problem worse? You have to understand why you're doing this and what is going to happen. You decide on the application of that problem based on the root cause of the problem. Then you have to come up with like, say you pick out the land and you're going to go to a contractor or an architect and help you design that. Once you have that together, those steps, then you can go and get the support you need from the bankers and the people who are willing to support that idea, the financial support. Because nobody's going to, let's say you have 15 kids, grandkids and their big extended family, and you're going to move into this little tiny house, and the bankers are not going to go along with that. Or some builder, you have to address all the issues related to that to get the support you need. Then the next step is you actually have to do it, and that has to address all the glitches in the plan. Then what you have to do is, okay, so let's say the U.S. government is doing this. We had a revolution. We came up with a plan. So over that 10-year period or 15-year period, before they wrote the Constitution, they had the war. They had to consider all the different issues related to it. And then what they had to do is they had to come up with a support. They had to come up with the people who would support them in it. Okay, the ambassadors are people like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. I'm not remembering if it was Thomas Jefferson, but Benjamin Franklin and John Adams were probably the two. Jefferson probably did too. But they went to France and they got the support that they needed because there was kind of a common goal there. Then what they did was they came back and they had a real structure there that was set into place, an idea. Then by getting France behind them, they had a structure that was strong enough to stand up where they could actually build the country. Okay, they had to have that support, and then that allowed them to address actually working on the country. Okay, we were going through a situation, and France was dealing with liberty and things like that too, and all those time periods. It was something where they were, instead of a monarchy where there was oppression, that France was going through the same kind of thing, working on liberty. Okay, then what happened is now we've been dealing with all these glitches for a long time. Are we standing on the principles of this issue? Are we actually doing this? Now I'm going to throw in an aside here. If you look at the Faith of the Pure Ray, our project of the Faith of the Pure Ray, you can see how all of this stuff plays out in the planning process, but related to religion. The 7 major religions. And what happens is this idea of dealing with the glitches, equality, liberty, the principles. Are you standing on the principles? And that's what each of the religions focuses on, is that, and the issue related to, does it solve the problem? Is it addressing the problem of the issues? And it's that, and is it the application of the principles? And you're might disagree with me, but as part of the aside here, we have the issue, the Ramadan is based on the idea, according to this faith of the Puree, that can unify all the major religions of the world into one idea. What it does is the people the Muslims who are celebrating Ramadan are looking at, am I standing on the principles? If I'm going to stand up and protest that something is not right, am I personally standing on the principles of this? And that's this issue that has to do with the Instagram video. If I'm standing up and saying I have the right to not wear a mask, am I standing on the principles of this? Would I do unto others, if I am a shopper, do I want to have somebody come in with COVID-19 who's just oppressive and just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until they get their way? Are they standing on the principles of this? So, if this is where the principles associated with Islam and the Muslims who are celebrating and really honestly looking at this, am I standing on the principles of this? If I'm going to protest, I'm going to get a backlash if I'm not standing on the principles of this. Now, as I said, after this idea in the planning process, as you're going around the planning process, what we have is the next step is security issues. And these are the principles of Hinduism. Okay, Jesus taught the principles of creativity, coming up with a plan. Am I standing on the principles of creativity? He talked about the Beatitudes. Am I standing on the principles of creativity? Am I coming up with a plan that solves problems? What are the principles of creativity? Jesus of Nazareth taught those principles. Moses taught the principles of bringing in bringing in the partners you need. And when you think of the Jewish people, you think of like brothers coming together and starting a restaurant or a business, and it's a family thing. They have a family business that's like a classic stereotypical Jewish person. Family is they have their partners, they have family members who help them do it. Okay. Then what happens is Gautama Buddha taught the principles of prosperity. Did Donald Trump teach the principles of prosperity? Or how about the Chinese people? Or, for heaven's sakes, Gautama Buddha? Buddhism teaches the principles of how to be prosperous? Wow, that's pretty cool. Okay, and then the Prophet Muhammad taught the principles of equality. And Rama and his wife Sita taught the principles in the Ramayana, the principles of security. Okay, so that's where we are as a nation right now, is security. So if we can, as American citizens, what we have to do is we have to address the principles of security. And we're talking about, as all the religions are in a pie shape, on the opposite side of the pie from security, we have the idea of the, let's say, the planning process, but we also have the idea of Judaism. And when you think of it, you think of somebody, the principles of having the brothers coming together, and who's going to defend you if you have a problem. If you have a business that's being attacked, are the two brothers going to come together, or is one just sabotaging it to pull out? Okay, is it making it bad for everybody? Okay, who's going to stand up and defend you at that point in time? Because there's a very, very scary point here in the planning process where if you can't deal with security, then you never get to never demonstrate your capacity. Okay, this is where people are when they die. They can't defend themselves. So at that point in time, so this is where people are now. If you have a Trader Joe's and you have 8 or 9 employees, big strapping guys, and there's 4 or 5 women and men, and they're standing outside the door saying, we don't need to wear masks, we don't need to wear masks, we have the right not to wear a mask, we don't need to have the right. And they're pushing and pushing and pushing, and they're going to stay there, and they're going to protest, and they're going to make things difficult for them. You know, if you have 8 or 9 big strapping guys who are standing there saying, it's the law, we have the law on our side. In Oregon, we have the law on our side, we have to wear masks, you're breaking the law here. You know, having the law on your side is important. Okay, so now what we're doing here as a nation is we're addressing this issue of security. Can we demonstrate our security? Where do we get our security from? Is it having a military, having 10,000 National Guard troops standing there to defend the inauguration? But what about the 4 years that are after the inauguration? How do you defend Joe Biden? Is it going to be a problem with that? Okay, is this going to be something that's going to last for the next 4 years until people just keep pushing and pushing and pushing? Where is our security? Okay. So how do you protect yourself from that? Then what happens is if you can defend yourself, if you have people standing up and defending themselves because the law is on their side and things like that, okay? What happens at that point in time is then you can demonstrate your capacity as a nation. Okay, the U.S. government has that's a magical point where you can walk away from the crisis and demonstrate you overcome your death, your end-of-life crisis. Then you go on to demonstrate your capacity, and then you have tolerance, and everybody's working together based on the principles of tolerance. And so Confucianism has to do with everybody functioning from their capacity, and then Lao Tzu taught the principles of Taoism is tolerance. He said running a government is like frying a small fish. You don't use any heat. Okay, if Donald Trump is using the maximum pressure, that's taking a little fish and frying it with maximum heat. Okay, that is not the principles of tolerance. That's intolerance. Okay, so that is the point where if you are going to create the life you want, I recommend, if you want to create a sense of prosperity in your life, if Donald Trump didn't make you prosperous, if Donald Trump didn't give you what you wanted in life and you're blaming the Democrats for it, the power that you have, you are responsible for creating your own life. Why would anybody want, if I'm on Social Security on a personal level, why would I care that Donald Trump is making you rich? If he's taking from the poor, that he's going to collapse Social Security and he's going to make you rich and prosperous, only his supporters. That's not fair. Okay? That's not fair to the people on Social Security who are dependent on that and who are trying to start small businesses. Okay. Now, the last thing is, once you reach that point, as you go around the planning circle and you overcome that lack of security, which is where our country is now, after we reach that point, this is the point where democracy dies. This is the point where the Democratic, the Republic of democracy, our democracy will die. We will lose what we have, and nobody. Okay, now we have another issue coming up here, and that is we never address this issue. The Republicans never address the issue of Russian interference in elections. So while we don't have any security here, are the Russians infiltrating into the United States? And whose side are you on? If you are a Republican, are you going to make Vladimir Putin the emperor of the planet? He's going to take over the whole world and be the next superpower? He's going to drive the United States into the mud, and then he's going to, like he's done other countries, and now what he's going to do, see, this is what happened. The genocide, what happened in Stonehenge, what caused England to go through, before it was a prosperous nation, it was probably the most prosperous nation on the planet, because they had their niche of conflict resolution. This is our exit strategy for a rock proposal, and why I'm talking about it, because this is my area of expertise. What happened was, I have a plan for world peace that benefits everyone. In England, during 5,000 years ago, they had a plan for conflict resolution that benefited everyone. But what happened was they had so much wealth and prosperity associated with it, because the kings would come and they would leave their money there. It made them a giant plum ready to be plucked. It was like, all we have to do is go in there and infiltrate, and then we'll take that and destroy it, and then we will have the wealth. Well, this happens over and over again. The idea of character defamation it has to do with a genocide, and that is the power game associated with the Jewish people. And I ask that I'm not judging Jewish people, because everybody plays a power game. But the Jewish people, their culture is set up in such a way, in Israel, being surrounded by the Muslims, they feel like they're like on an island surrounded by sharks. And not necessarily because in the Middle East they've maintained peace for a long time. It's just when the Americans come in and interfere that they feel like they're sharks, and then they're going to ask America to defend them. But it's also a power game where they're saying we're victims, and that's how genocides start. People who've been feel they've been victimized start genocides because it's a sense of judgment. Okay, all this stuff is so big that I'm talking about that you might not be able to appreciate it. But if you want to create a sense of prosperity, you have to understand all the steps of the planning process to do it. Okay, you have to understand the principles of creativity, productivity, prosperity, equality, security, capacity, and tolerance and empowerment. And then you create the life you want. That's the point where you achieve your success. You have to be able to, if you have built a house and you can't deal with security issues, somebody comes in and steals everything you got out of it, it's maybe burns it down or whatever. How are you going to solve that problem? How can you ever demonstrate your capacity to bring your family together? And like all those 15 relatives, I'm exaggerating. But how do you ever demonstrate your capacity if there's no security there? And this is what happened with England. They never were able to address the issue of security. So now what's happening now is we're back to that same point where the cycles have reached the point where we're all addressing issues related to security. And then we have to start to demonstrate capacity. Okay, Now, that is basically what I wanted to talk about today. If you want security, do you need to have an army? Do you need the National Guard standing there in front of the White House going, we're not going to let you in? And the people going, we have the right to do that. We have the right to free speech. We have the right. This is our house. We're going to stand here and we're just going to nag at you until you leave, because you can't spend 4 years defending Joe Biden. Okay? See what I mean? This idea of nagging and justification for that has to stop. But what causes it to stop is that all those people who depended on Donald Trump have to assume responsibility for their own financial support, their own sense of prosperity. Now, the last thing is, Donald Trump has been weaving an illusion. He's been telling lies. In fact, there was an article this morning that after the Twitter and Facebook suspended his accounts, the amount of false information dropped 73%. About the election. It dropped 73%. Trump and his close people were supplying 73% of the false information on the internet about the elections. 73%. So there are two power games that are based on weaving an illusion. One of them is genocide, which is what the power game, I said, associated with the Jewish people. And on the opposite side is security issues. So this is where we have issues related to security. I recommend that you go on the Facebook page, on my, not the Facebook page. I recommend that you go on the Faith of the Pure Ray website. It's a blog that I created. And it's not so much a blog where I'm posting every day right now, but it explains how the 7 major religions come together, and they focus on this idea. It's the second row of the World Peace Marketing Strategy. So let's say that if you have the schism has divided people up into 4 groups. The first group is standing on the principles. Let's say that's the Democrats. And the second group are the Republicans, who are focused on power, principles and power. And when they get together and they separate like that, people's lives are affected. And then the last group function for their own interests. So find out how people on the exit strategy for Iraq, on the World Peace Marketing Strategy, and on the Faith of the Pure Ray, go and find out how this is affecting you. If you want prosperity, go onto the Faith of the Pure Ray. If you are a faithofthepureray.org, and I'll put the links down below. If you are a person from Central America who's walked 2,000 miles up to Texas to get into America to be safe from the oppression of the government down there in Central America, how do you rebuild your life based on the idea of when you only have the stuff that you could carry with you, and you had no security, because if you fell asleep, who's going to protect what you have in your wallet, so to speak? Or what happens if you had no security? So how do you deal with no security? See what I mean? You have to come up with an idea. The character defamation is the judgment against you. So look at all of these ideas that I'm suggesting you look at. And if you want prosperity in your life, or if you are looking at this idea of the schism that separated people into 4 groups. The schism that's divided the Republicans and the Democrats, that's tearing apart the world, has sent ripples of effects off. But the world peace movement has started now, and every movement separates the people into 4 groups also. So the American Revolution movement separated people that stood on the principles, like John Adams, Paul Revere, and the people, Sam Adams, the people like that. The second group of people were the Republicans, like let's say the people who were like Alexander Hamilton, and the people who didn't come in to the movement. These were the first people. These people didn't come into the movement until they lost their financial support. Isn't this where the Republicans are now? The Trump supporters, they're losing their support. They're losing Donald Trump. The third group of people come in because their lives are affected. Donald Trump's approval rating has gone down a lot, down to 30% or so. When he reaches 25%, that means he's lost his supporters, his group of people. He's lost the Republicans. He's always lost the Democrats. He's lost the Republicans, and he's lost the people. And the only people he has left supporting him are the people who function for their own interests, and those are the people who start rebellions. So we have a rebellion here, but Donald Trump only has support of 25 people. He cannot become president of the United States again with a 25% approval rating by the people who function. He cannot become president by starting a revolution. Okay? So now, that's all I wanted to talk about today. If you are suffering now from COVID-19 and being part of this new group of people, the new surge of cases that are going out because of the attack on the Capitol, okay, you're dealing with security issues. This is the point where we're dealing with security issues. Whenever we deal with security issues, this is a very bad situation. It's part of the planning process. So look to see how Hindus defend themselves from character defamation, and that is the idea of Diwali. That's why the let's say the holidays of Christmas and peace on earth, goodwill toward all, and then Passover, and then Wesak, and then that's the Gautama Buddha. That's a Buddhist holiday, and then Ramadan, and how each of these, and then Diwali. Deepavali is the name of that, and the light coming back, and the idea that enlightenment. How did Gautama Buddha become enlightened? Deepavali, and the idea of how Rama and Sita defended. They were able to overcome the attack by Ravana in the Ramayana. There's a really cute video on it that explains the whole thing, and it is, I watched it. You can search for it. It's called Sita, Sita, Sings the Blues. It explains the Ramayana in kind of like Western language, something that we can understand. And basically, I recommend that you watch that fun video. It's got beautiful music in it. It's like blues. So watch to see what Rama and Sita and Ravana, the story of the Ramayana is, and how they defended themselves from the attack by Ravana and the character defamation campaign. Okay, so if we are going to rebuild America and have a sense of prosperity, we have to understand how the religions all came together and how God already taught us everything that we needed to know. The intolerance does, by separating ourselves, we're a Christian nation, and we're going to leave out all the Muslims, we're going to separate out the Jews, we're going to separate out all those Asian people because they're not standing on Christian religions, they don't have God, all that kind of stuff that doesn't make sense. We're all together. We are one world. And how are we going to overcome this global security issue that led to the pandemic? Okay, that's all I wanted to say for today. So, like, share, and subscribe, but mostly share. Share this information with other people, because this is too big for just a few people to understand. This has to go out so people understand where it's coming from. Okay, thank you. Be sure to share. Thank you.